Graduates, it has happened. It has happened, right? You have finished preschool. You have finished elementary school. You have finished middle school, and now you have finished high school. And now, wow, right? Wow, some of you are going off to college. We got 2 cowboys in the group, right? Go Pokes, right? Come on, Lily, come on, girl, come on. You got to learn that, right? So we got some that are going to college. We got some that are going to learn a trade. Some of you are going to jump straight into the workforce. The possibilities that lay ahead of you all are endless. And I know that I only listed 3 of them, right? I mean, because that's really all I got time for at the moment. But the possibilities are endless. And what you need to know is that the decisions that you make right now are going to affect all those possibilities. No pressure, right? You got this. You got this. So what I want to do today is I want to give a graduation speech with some biblical wisdom that will help you move forward as you take the next step and the next step and the next step and the next step and the next step. And I could do that for 30 minutes, but you know where I'm going, right? Every step that you take. And for those of you who, like me, graduation is way back there in the rearview mirror, right? Before you tune me out, know that there's some wisdom in this message for you as well. But like I said, I want to give a graduation speech. You see, I never got to give one in high school. So since I have a microphone and you have to listen, I'm going to live out my past ambition here today, and I'm going to give a graduation speech, all right? Now, I know that the graduation speeches are normally reserved for the valedictorian, right? They're normally reserved for maybe the salutatorian. I get that. I understand that. Well, I was not one of them. Okay, so I didn't really know how to study until I met Leslie in college. You see, I was an A and B student in high school. I rarely had to work at it at all. I mean, it just came easy. I was an A, B, and a few C type student in college until Leslie. And then after I met Leslie, President's honor roll. Yeah, Dean's honor roll. That's how I finished out college. From there, I was a mostly A student. I had just a couple of B's in seminary. And I tell people all the time that had I met Leslie in high school, I could have been a Rhodes Scholar, gone to Oxford, and written the next great novel like C.S. Lewis. So here's my first piece of wisdom. You all need to have a Leslie in your life. Okay, you need to have a Leslie in your life. And I'm not talking about a yes person, right? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about someone who encourages you to do your best and to be your best. Not someone who's going to coddle you, not someone who's going to tell you you're always right, not that, right? But you need someone in your life who's going to speak truth with love and pushes you, even kicking and screaming into the person that God called and created you to be. And so Leslie, thank you. Thank you for doing that for me then and for ever since. So I guess this is the part of the speech where the thank yous are shared, right? So they always do that. So let me share some thank yous. And I'm being honest when I say these. I'm not being flippant. Thank you, East Cross Church. Thank you, church, for always loving me, always supporting me. Thank you to the East Cross team, AKA the church staff, for allowing me the space to grow and to make mistakes. Thank you to my family for always loving me through all the good and the bad, the highs and the lows, the peaks and the valleys, just so I can stand here before you all today and be the man that I am. And thank you to the Lord God, without whom I would not be here today, surrounded by so many people who are seeking to grow upward, outward, and forward. So let's grow, church. All right. Well, in preparation for this speech, I watched a lot of graduation speeches, way more than I probably should have. And there's some really bad ones out there, I'm just going to tell you, right? So, for those of you who are friends with me on Facebook, I shared one that I loved this last week. I loved it, right? I told you guys, once you get on Facebook, look it up. You're going to love it too. It was a great one about the importance of the relationships that we have. Did a fantastic job, a very bright young man. But there's one that I've been holding off on. There's one that I wanted to wait to share the wisdom of today. I want to make sure that you're really ready to take in everything that this speech has to offer. It has so much truth packed into a very short speech. Let's take a look. Now, I gave this disclaimer in first service. I am by no means sponsored by Progressive. I got no kickbacks for any of this, nothing like that. If you want to be with State Farm, fantastic. That's great. Allstate, whatever. Okay, so none of that. But the things that there's some things in there that I never thought about at your age, right? I never thought about them. In fact, at the age of 49, there's some things in that statement and that little speech that I never thought about. See, I don't think that I've ever had to deal with a duvet cover, so I've never had to think about it, which made me think about it. So I asked Alexa, I said, Alexa, what is a duvet cover? I did. And this is what Alexa says. It's a cover for a duvet. The duvet cover protects the duvet during use. Well, that cleared that right up for me. So then after first service, I had many people come up and go, a duvet cover is like a blanket. I don't change the cover I don't cover my blankets. I don't get, so anyways, I still don't know what a duvet is. I don't think I have to worry about that, but we'll see what happens in the future, okay? So let's get to some wisdom, right? Let's get to some wisdom. If you have your Bibles with you this morning, either in print or on your phone or on your tablet, then please join me in Paul's letter to Timothy, Paul's first letter to Timothy, and we're going to be in chapter 4, right? Now, just a little bit of a background on Timothy. I shared some of this not too long ago, but I shared that Timothy accompanied Paul on his missionary journeys. So this time together allowed Paul to serve as a mentor to Timothy. He eventually was sent by Paul as a representative to many churches and ultimately wound up as the pastor of the church at Ephesus. Well, it's in his role as the pastor that Paul writes this letter to him and encourages him in ministry and in his personal life. So let's look at 1 Timothy 4, and we're going to be in verse 12. 1 Timothy 4:12. Listen for the word of God this morning. Because Paul writes this, he says, don't let anyone look down on you because you're young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. Graduates, I said this in first service, I'm going to say it again, and I want you to hear it. Don't let anyone look down on you because you're young. 23 years ago, when I went to seminary, in my first class ever, in fact, in the first 15 minutes of what would turn out to be 4 years of graduate level education, the professor, an older guy, right? And when you're in your teens and 20s, everybody's older. It doesn't matter. You could be 29, barely pushing it. You're old, right? But he asked me what my favorite book of the Bible was, and I said, Timothy. The professor said, which one? You know, there's 2 books, right? Yes, I knew that there were 2 books, but that's not what came out in the initial answer. What came out was Timothy. That's because I was nervous, right? I was feeling out of place in the room with all of these theologians. So eventually I said, yes, sir, I know that there are 2 books. To which he responds, actually, they're letters, not books. So with his second response, I began second guessing my call to full-time ministry, and I was wondering if I'd get my job back at Pepsi. But of course, in the midst of the frustration, he could not leave me alone. He had to ask the question, why? Why is this your favorite book? I sat there for with that deer in the headlight looks, you know what I'm talking about? I sat there like that for like a minute. I know it was a good solid minute. And I finally said, because of the verse that says, don't let anyone look down on you because you're young. And what I wanted to add, but my mentor stopped me, was kind of like you're doing right now, right? That's what I wanted to do, but I didn't do it, right? I was respectful in the moment. You see, I felt too young to be doing this pastoring thing. I mean, all of the pastors that I have known in my life were older. Jerry Perryman, the one who baptized me at Capitol Hill in Oklahoma City as an infant, was older. And then he was even older when I ran into him at local pastor's licensing school. Brother Harrison at Southwest Baptist Church in Oklahoma City was older, right? Probably in his 60s when I was there. I don't know for sure how old Brother Boynston was at Sunnyside Baptist Church, but he had served in World War II where he lost an arm. And then he had a prosthetic hook. I think I've shared a little bit about that before, right? He had a prosthetic hook on there. And if you fell asleep in the middle of service, he'd take that hook and... That was a little harder than I wanted to do right there. Woo! That was a power. Woo! That kind of freaked me out a little bit, all right? Right, but he would take it and he'd bang that hook on the pulpit to make sure that you were awake. And I love watching people go, ah, like that. It was just fantastic, right? The youngest pastor was probably Paul Cunningham at Capitol Hill UMC in Oklahoma City, who was in his 40s when I was there in my early teens. Now, there were a few other pastors in my life, but none of them were 26. I was young. I was young when I first went to Oshaleta to serve as the pastor there. And I went as a student pastor, right? My first charge ever. I couldn't believe that they put me in charge of a church at 26. Some of the church members used to joke and say that they helped raise me since I was so young. Many called me the young pup, and still to this day they call me the young pup. When I came to East Cross 4 years later, I was still young, but I was kind of pushing it, right? I was at 30, so I was kind of pushing that young. But I was still trying to figure it all out. When I came to East Cross, I wanted to seem mature. I wanted to seem wise beyond my years, but you know what? That didn't happen. No, my youth and my inexperience and my immaturity showed through. And this is when I went back to look at this verse and really sought to understand it. I did this because I kept asking myself, at what age will I ever be at the right age where people will take me seriously? At what age will people take me seriously, especially as a pastor? Now, for those of you who were here in 2006, I'm not saying that you all treated me that way, but that's the way that I felt. I felt too young. Too young. So I did some study on this passage. Specifically, I wanted to know how old was Timothy when Paul wrote this to him? I mean, after all, Paul didn't start out the letter saying, hey, to my 19-year-old buddy Timothy, right? Or 22 or 28 or whatever. He didn't do that. So to find the answer, it took a little bit of work. And what we know is that Timothy first joined Paul's team around 49 to 50 AD. You can read all about it in Acts 16, 1 through 3. And then we know that Paul wrote 1 Timothy in either 64 or 65 AD. So basically 15 years had passed, right? 15 years. 15 years of traveling with Paul and learning from Paul. Okay, so we have to ask the question, we have the 15 years, but we have to ask the question, how old was he when he started, right? I mean, he wasn't a baby when he started, right? So we have to ask that question to find out how old he was at this point. I'll save you all the research, but the best educated guess is that he was at least 15. At least 15. In Roman culture, men would marry roughly about 16, right? So this kind of gives us a starting point that we can work from. We also know that it was common for men to start apprenticeships in their teens. Also, based on the fact that he co-authored some letters with Paul, we know that Timothy was literate, so that he could read and write, and he could do so convincingly, which means he had to have more than just a basic education, which obviously takes time. Also, we learn from Acts that he had already built up some credibility as a missionary before ever joining Paul. So that means he had to put in the effort and the time for people to know him and to be able to speak on his behalf. So if we run with that 15-15 theory, that means Timothy was 30. The same age I was when I came to East Cross. So if Paul is telling Timothy, don't let anyone look down on you because you're young, he's telling them that at 30, then what chance do I stand at 30 or 35 or 40? I mean, after all, the Apostle Paul did not appoint me or send me to East Cross, right? There's no clout based on the connection, right? But studying this verse made me really look at the whole of the verse. You see, I focused on just one part. But what happens if we look at the whole of the verse? So hear the verse again. Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity, right? That's the NIV. That's what the NIV says. Listen to the New Life Version. The New Life Version of 1 Timothy 4:12 says this, let no one show little respect for you because you are young. Show other Christians how to live by your life. They should be able to follow you in the way you talk and in what you do. Show them how you live in faith and in love and in holy living. And then one more time from the J.B. Phillips New Testament. J.B. Phillips, for those of you who don't know, was a contemporary of C.S. Lewis and translated the Bible in a way that was easier for the people of his day to understand. It's kind of like an early version of the Message Bible. You guys know what the Message Bible is, right? It's kind of an early version of that. But Phillips translated 1 Timothy 4:12 this way. He says, don't let people look down on you because you're young. See that they look up to you. See that they look up to you because you are an example to them in your speech and behavior, in your love and faith and sincerity. See that they look up to you. Don't look down, but look up. I finally started to understand. It's not about age. It's about maturity. Not about age, it's about maturity. It's about a life that is lived in such a way that others see past the youthfulness and they witness the depth that exists inside. For me, I'll tell you, this changed the conversation. It changed the conversation completely. And for graduates and for everyone else here that's listening and those online, it can do the exact same thing for you. It can change the conversation of your life. You know, I've heard it said numerous times that age is just a number. First of all, tell my knees and my back that, right? I mean, right? But secondly, I think there's a little bit of truth in it. It's not always true. Most of the time, probably not. But I think there's a little bit of truth in that. After all, I know a lot of adults who are older than I who have not yet reached maturity, and as such, they don't have the impact that they could have ever had. But of course, the other side of that, I know some young people who are far more mature than I. In fact, when I served on the district community on ministry, there was a young man still in high school, that could not only preach the word of God and do so convincingly, and he's a fantastic preacher, fantastic. He could do that from the pulpit. But he also preached it by the way he lived his life. And he's still doing that. He's still doing that now in his late 20s, right? With a college degree and a seminary degree, and he's serving a local church. And I'll tell you, when I met this young man, I said, I want to be like him when I grow up. You see, growing up means maturing. It means maturing. Another year does not make you wiser. It doesn't. Yes, you have another year of life experiences, but have you learned anything from them? Have you done that? In regard to your faith, right? Over that last year, have you grown upward towards God, outward in service to the world, and forward telling others about Jesus? You see, it doesn't matter if you're 10 or 16 or 18 or 23 or 35, 49, 67, 73, 81, 95. Growth can still happen. And if growth happens, we become mature. So let's grow, church. But to grow, to mature, we have to leave the childish ways behind. A few weeks ago, we looked at 1 Corinthians 13. And in verse 11 of 1 Corinthians 13, Paul wrote this. He said, when I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. Now, I don't think that Paul's saying, hey, graduates, don't enjoy your youth, right? Hurry up, grow up, be responsible adults. We want you to be responsible adults. Don't hear me say, well, you don't want you to, right? But he's not saying not to enjoy your youth, right? Enjoy it as long as you can. But once again, it's not about age. It's about maturity. You can still be young and be mature. So what Paul is saying is that eventually we all have to mature, especially when the circumstances of our lives dictate it. It would be great. It would absolutely be great if we were already mature when those circumstances arose. Yet we'd already be ready for whatever may come our way. But that's not always the case. You see, I know that when I graduated high school, I felt like I was ready. And my life was mapped out. I felt mature. I was off to Oklahoma State University to be a veterinarian. And then I was going to open a clinic in Oklahoma City. I was going to help small animals and their families live the best life they can together. And then I went to college. Wow. I was somehow enrolled in forestry. And that was about the time summer hit. And I was second guessing everything that I had planned. And then to top it off, I gained the freshman 40 due to my diet of McDonald's and boxed spaghetti. Now, for those of you who don't know, normally it's the freshman 15, but I'm an overachiever, so I got the freshman 40. So, you see, I didn't realize how immature I was and how much I would be responsible for when my circumstances changes, right? Just like the Progressive Commercial Illustrator, right? There are a lot of things for which you graduates, you're now going to be responsible for. Many things for which the majority of the rest of us, right, are responsible for. Sure, we're responsible for taxes. Maybe a duvet cover. I don't know still if I'm responsible for a duvet cover. But the truth is, you are now responsible for yourselves. You're responsible for yourselves. You're going to be responsible for yourself to make sure you get up early enough to get to work or to class on time. You're going to be responsible for all of your breakfasts, all of your lunches, and all of your dinners, right? You're going to be responsible for making wise financial decisions, right? Wise financial decisions and not getting a credit card so that you can purchase swords and VHS tapes from your favorite TV show. I've shared that before. If you don't know what I'm talking about, see me after service. You're going to be responsible for creating and maintaining healthy relationships. You're going to be responsible for your own faith development. You are. I say this all the time. You cannot live on the faith of your parents or your spouse or your kids. You just can't do that. We all have to make that decision for ourselves. Plainly put, and I know this seems harsh amidst the celebration of graduation, but I want you to know today that I'm speaking truth. I'm speaking truth in love to you and back to all of us, and myself included. You are now responsible for how you live your life. And the decisions that you make from here on out are going to affect that. You're responsible. Your circumstances have changed. They have. It's time to lean into that maturity so that we can make those decisions and let our lives show this growth by how we speak and by how we act. Now, I told you I watched a lot of graduation speeches in preparation for this. I did. And it seems that every good graduation speech, the speaker shares from their life so that they can eventually share some truth, right? So I've shared a little bit of my life with you this morning. So let me just share some wisdom so that as you're listening in, there's something that you can go away with. So if you will allow me to share with you what helped me to mature the most. And trust me, there's still a lot of maturing left to do inside. I'll tell you. You can ask my family. They're going to back me up on that. But without this truth, I would not be here today. Proverbs 16:9. Proverbs 16:9 says this: in their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. In their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. As I said, when I graduated high school, I had big plans, right? But the problem was I never took those plans to God. I stepped out on my own, and in my immaturity, especially in my immaturity in the faith, and I actually left behind what I had learned and trusted. And I'll tell you, as a result of that, I had many setbacks. I went to church when I could, right? And I'll just tell you, that's a flat-out excuse that I basically saying I didn't make God a priority at the time. I really did not spend any time in the Bible, and I only prayed when it was time to eat, and I think I did that more out of habit than actual devotion. I tried to go it on my own. And when the circumstances changed again, I realized how stuck I was in my immaturity. And then in my first senior year, yes, you heard that right, in my first senior year, I started to pray again. My prayers were rudimentary at best, but my prayer was specific. For God to help me meet a woman who would love me, encourage me, and ultimately become my wife. With this plan, I began a maturation process that helped me to leave the childish things behind and to grow up. I started to remember all I had learned in those years at church and from the times that I'd spent in the Bible, those times that I'd spent in prayer. And not only did I remember them, but I began to cling to them. I began to rest in the promises of God. I began to make God a priority once again. I started earnestly looking for a church. I started back in the Word. I started a regular scheduled prayer time. I began to live out Proverbs 16:9, to trust God to order my steps, to direct my life. Now I will tell you, I really wish I would not have wasted those years. I really do. I really wish I would not have wasted the years. But looking back, I can see that even though I wasn't looking for God, God was still there. So just to finish that story, I met Leslie the following summer, and within a year and a half, we were married. Leslie not only helped me get my grades up, but she helped me grow deeper in my faith. With her, I found a church where I could grow, right? University Worship Center, right there on the Strip in Stillwater, who did have a younger pastor, by the way, Brad Riley. He was still older than me, but Brad Riley. And with her support and encouragement, I got into ministry all those years ago, and I'm still trying my best with God's help and Leslie's support to love as I've been loved and to lead His church. And all of this started with a prayer and the realization that I needed to grow and allow God to establish my steps. But I'll tell you, none of this happened until I stopped letting people look down on me because of my youth. And when I say people, I'm talking about myself. As you heard, I was the one. I was the one who kept that narrative alive that I was too young to make a difference. I was the one who's content to live in my childish ways. Nobody was keeping me, there was me. I was the one who ultimately had to make the decision to mature. And at 49, I think I'm finally reaching a sense of maturity when it comes to the faith. So hear me when I say it's a process. It's a lifelong process. But let me encourage you, graduates, and everyone else who's listening. Do the work to mature. Do the work to mature. Let me encourage you not only to invite God into this process, but to keep God at the center of it. Keep God as the focus. Let me encourage you not to let anyone, yourself included, ever look down on you because you're young. Let me encourage you to live your life in a way that honors God and serves as an example for how the rest of us can live ours. Let me encourage you to remember to put in practice what you've learned here at East Cross and from your own prayer time and your own time in God's Word. And finally, let me encourage you as you make plans to let God establish your steps, especially as you set out on this next adventure.